Hello, everyone, and welcome to Health Discoveries, the definitive location for the latest in health breakthroughs. This is Todd Bates, your host for this fast-paced and informative show. Today, we're discussing an extraordinary breakthrough in the area of cardiovascular health. Cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer in America today. Over 1 million people will die this year alone due to heart disease. Over 1 million people. That's nearly 2,800 people a day. That's the equivalent of 7 fully loaded 747s crashing every day with no survivors. Cardiovascular disease is also the leading cause of death among women, even more than breast cancer. That's over 500,000 women a year dying due to strokes and heart attacks. Women have overtaken men in fatalities due to heart disease. Cardiovascular disease is known as the silent killer because for 50% of its victims, the first sign of trouble is death. Many otherwise healthy-looking people are at risk for cardiovascular disease, even some who exercise every day. Many of its victims have normal cholesterol and normal blood pressure. I don't know anyone who has not been affected by this disease in one way or another. My father suffered from a stroke. I know many people who have undergone open heart surgery or bypass surgeries. A very good friend of mine recently passed away from a massive heart attack. We all know people who have been affected by this huge epidemic. So what can be done? Eat better? Exercise? Take vitamins? Well, today we're going to fill you in on a scientific breakthrough that's changing lives. Research has discovered a nutrient that's supported by the Nobel Prize in Medicine. This amazing nutrient is an amino acid called L-Arginine. Over 35,000 articles have been published regarding the importance of the nitric oxide pathway and the amazing influence of arginine on this pathway. The vast importance of arginine in cardiovascular health has been recognized by the head of cardiovascular research from Stanford, as well as the head of Harvard Medical School and hundreds of doctors and scientists throughout the world. And here on the phone today to tell us more about this breakthrough nutrient is Dr. J. Joseph Prendergast. Dr. Prendergast is an endocrinologist that specializes in the treatment of diabetes. He has published more than 40 papers. He serves on numerous review boards, including the California Medical Review Board, and he recently received an award from the American Medical Association for his humanitarian efforts. Dr. Prendergast has lectured extensively in the United States and Asia and is considered to be one of the foremost thought leaders in the field. Dr. Prendergast, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Okay, Dr. Joe. Well, we know all the statistics surrounding heart attack and stroke. Of course, over 1 million people die each year. 50% are women. For many, the first sign is death. But what actually causes a heart attack or stroke?
When we have a heart attack, it's not as though it is a relentless buildup of cholesterol in the artery that gradually chokes off the blood supply. That was the idea 10 or 15 years ago, but it's not true. It is a situation where you're actually getting this plaque which causes unstable flow in the artery. In other words, it's sort of like when you whistle, that's unstable airflow. You have a whistle that tells you that that's doing it. And the same kind of thing is done in the arteries. We detect these things with Dopplers and a whole bunch of other things that we use medically to do it, but it's nothing more than the vibrations of the fluid, the blood going over a surface that's bigger, and then therefore, by virtue of that sound, it breaks up the plaque. The plaque suddenly has no cap, and the cap is the word that's used for this little topmost part of where the cholesterol is pushing through. And it creates a shower of inflammatory things that immediately causes a clot. Now, that's great if you've been hit by an arrow or something like that. It stops the bleeding and everything else is good. But when it does it by its own within the framework of an artery, then that clot forms on that broken cap, and then it fills up the artery, which is called a heart attack or stroke. So blood just doesn't go through anymore.
So then, Dr. Joe, what role does high blood pressure play in all of this?
You have three basic things and two basic mechanisms that how you have high blood pressure. One is that there's some gradual, abnormal, I'll say, thickening in the arteries, but it's inelastic arteries. It's the kind of thing is they don't flux the way they would ordinarily when you're a teen. They don't give with the blood stroke from the heart. They don't bend as well as they used to. And with that, as the arteries become stiff and inelastic, the blood pressure slowly goes up. That's one mechanism. The second is the cholesterol, as we just talked about, also makes it sort of stiff. It's supposed to be spreading a little bit with each heartbeat and then contracting as it's pushed along. But when you get all that cholesterol, it just doesn't work very well, and the pressures get abnormally high and create problems that cause heart attacks and strokes, as we just went over. But the concept of how the whole mechanism within the artery can be changed by the use of arginine is key. The arginine works, as we talked about, in this internal lining, making it much more flexible, but it is a unifying factor that prevents all these terrible things we really know about, like heart attack and stroke.
Wow, that's great information, Dr. Joe. Now, I know heart disease is a topic that really hits home for you. Could you share your family's history with this terrible disease?
Well, my first encounter with even this concept of bad vascular problems began when I was 14. I was a freshman in high school, and in the spring of that year, my father sustained a major stroke. And I really do still remember seeing him with one side of his body paralyzed and losing all sort of power within his own framework and realizing I was in grave danger of losing the person I admired most in the world. And he never was able to really recover, but he never really worked in a very effective way from that point on. So I knew there was something in my family and something very dangerous that I had to think about. Well, I just made a routine visit to the doctor when I was in my late 30s, and I had a CAT scan of my abdomen, and he had the films with him during that time. And I still remember him looking at them and looking at me and then turning around and holding them up to the light so he could see them very well. And as he was studying them and moving around, he was looking at them, and I was looking over his shoulder to hear him say, "Who's your cardiologist?" And I almost fainted. I could see represented an awful lot of hardening of the arteries.
Well, I'm sure that was quite a shock, Dr. Joe. Nobody wants to get news like that. Thankfully, though, that's not the end of the story. So what led you from that point to discovering this all-natural solution, L-Arginine?
Well, in the search for something new, it's ironic that I was asked by one of the pharmaceutical companies who developed statins to go on a speaking tour throughout California with Dr. Victor Zhao, who at that time was head of the cardiovascular research department at Stanford. He would talk about how to help prevent heart disease in people who didn't have diabetes, and I would talk about people who did have diabetes. And as he would finish his talks, and me mine, we always would chat a little bit, and he kept saying, "You know, I've got a really good thing. It's really going to help everybody. It's going to help everybody whether they have diabetes or not, and it's just going to be terrific." And I said, "Well, what is it?" And he said, "Well, of course, I can't tell you. It's my research." But even then, the Internet outed him, and it was a situation where I could go and look up the fact that he had written 30 papers in 1 year on L-Arginine. When I called his secretary, she said he isn't here anymore. He has been transferred to be the head of all internal medicine for Stanford. Give him a month, he'll settle down, come by, and I'm sure he'll be glad to talk to you. And so I sat for that period of time and called again, only to find that she greeted me by saying, "He's no longer with Stanford." And I said, "What on earth has happened? Where is he going now?" She said, "Well, now he's becoming chairman of the Department of Medicine at Harvard. But there is a cocktail party and he will be glad to sit with you and tell you about it during this period of time. But you only have 30 minutes. So I went to the cocktail party, cornered him among the throng of well-wishers, and then said, well, what's the dose for humans? I want to know how to take care of my patients. I want to know how to take care of myself. And he said, well, of course, I don't know. I do rats and rabbits. But John Cook has now taken over my chairmanship of the Department of Cardiovascular Research, and he does humans. He can tell you all about it. And so that's how I met the second most important person in this whole array of experience with L-Arginine, John Cook. John Cook has become one of my best friends. I continue to follow his career and incorporate all his research in the things that I'm doing and doing within the practice. And it's his continued interest in the research that made a big difference. But you know, something right in the middle of these two events was most important of all. When the Nobel Prize in Medicine was given to the three other scientists, not at Stanford, who had been working on L-Arginine for years, and the Nobel Prize in Medicine was given for the nitric oxide pathway, and the only real thing that we have known about that influences this pathway positively is L-Arginine. And that's how we really got going on L-Arginine.
That's great, Dr. Joe. So what have you seen in your medical practice?
Well, as I incorporated a lot of these in my personal health, all these new pieces of information, the emphasis also is, of course, on the patients, the people I deal with. It's had a tremendous impact on my people I see, all my patients within the practice itself. The change began in the early 90s when we began to incorporate the arginine. It made a tremendous difference because we were sending about 30% of all people who walked in the office off to the cardiologist during the course of a year. And I felt like I was sort of a conduit to them rather than doing any other major things where I had a major contribution. So as we began to incorporate this, we quickly saw that it made a tremendous influence on the amount of people that we sent. It got better and better as we got smarter and smarter, and in the last 10 years we have a situation where we have less than 0.5% of people who we have now seen in our practice who go and see the cardiologist for anything at all. So this is a dramatic shift from 30% to 0.5%. We're now sliding into our second decade on that, and the people that we see here really think that this is wonderful. It has made a tremendous difference to deal in health, not just cope with disease, to be able to reverse the situations that's abnormal. It has been a tremendous change for the people whom I see regularly, and it has changed my whole life.
So, Dr. Joe, basically what you're telling us is that you've not had any of your diabetic patients develop heart disease in the last 10 years.
That's right. This has been an incredible change. It's hard to believe. If I hadn't experienced it, I wouldn't know this. But here we have all but 0.5% of people over the last 10 years have had no encounters with the cardiologist. That's just plain incredible.
Dr. Joe, that's absolutely amazing. Well, now let's talk about you. You've personally been taking arginine since the early 90s. What's been your personal experience with arginine?
Well, because of all this, I happened to have another visit to a physician who also did another one of these CAT scans that I had back in my 30s, and I had the opportunity to look at it with the person that asked that original question, who is my cardiologist? This time he looked at it, same kind of examination, same situation where I was looking over his shoulder, and he said, how'd you do this? It's all gone. You don't have any atherosclerosis there at all. What did you do? I want to do it. This is really incredible. So based on that, I was emboldened to do something I never thought I would want to do because I was fearful for what I would see. And I went through a similar kind of scan on the heart itself to see if I had any hardening of the arteries in the coronary arteries, the arteries that clog up and cause heart attacks and the like. And when I looked at the person who was looking at this, looking over my history of what I'd told them, and they said, "My God, you don't have any hardening of the arteries in your heart at all," I was very pleased. We now have technology that can actually measure the integrity of your arteries. Is there a stiffness? Is there a clogging? Is there a situation that you would need to watch as you start your therapy? And the L-Arginine is something you can watch all the arteries, all the stiffness, the integrity return to normal. So this concept of measuring something that's wrong, treating something, measuring it again is an integral part of my practice, which used to be just part of all the universities. And my personal situation with this is that I had never done it the first time because I started way back in my 30s, but when this technology became available, and I'd been taking the arginine for about 6 to 8 years, I really wanted to know, and now everybody wanted to know what my arteries were like. And now I have the arteries of a 16-year-old, 16-year-old. Imagine that. I'm a 68-year-old man with an artery of a 16-year-old.
This is truly fascinating. Folks, you need to get a hold of this information. Now, you can go to arginineinfo.com to get more information about arginine. That's arginineinfo.com. That's spelled ARGININE info.com, and you'll learn a lot of information about arginine. All right, let's get back to the show. Dr. Joe, we've talked about what arginine has done in your personal life as well as in your medical practice. Now, we know that arginine is the precursor to nitric oxide, which means when we supplement with arginine, our bodies produce more nitric oxide. So, Dr. Joe, what exactly is nitric oxide?
Nitric oxide is a metabolic pathway that has great influence on other tissues. When we talk about metabolic pathways, we talk about things that are sort of in charge of certain areas of the body. And this pathway is in most tissues. And this pathway, as far as we're concerned, has its most significant process within the framework of the lining of the arteries. The lining of the arteries are things that are very fluid. They change a lot. They change very fast. And arginine can influence it positively, make it much better within as little as 48 hours. You can see it in lots of experiments that are certainly like this. And that is the reason, basically, why the Nobel Prize was given for this new metabolic pathway that really made a major difference in everybody's life who knew about it and those who are knowing about it now. The way nitric oxide works in the endothelium is a kind of thing that John Cook, who wrote The Cardiovascular Cure, often describes in the following way. If you have bad arteries, that is, they are inelastic, they are filling up with cholesterol, all the things we know are bad for us, you have the lining of the arteries that are like Velcro. They attach all the bad things onto it, incorporating it and making it not good. On the other hand, if we give the L-Arginine, it smooths out the arteries. It makes them tougher. And the analogy John Cook uses is it turns them into Teflon. It makes them tough, it makes them smooth, it makes them healthy. It's amazing about how it sort of seals off and makes stable the plaque that's in the arteries. When it's unstable, the plaque actually breaks, that a bunch of other inflammatory things take place and go rocketing through your system, create an increased risk of actually blood clots occurring on the top of this and all kinds of bad things that happen to cause heart attack and stroke. So what arginine does is first stabilize the surface of the endothelium. The second thing it does is to basically work from the middle of the artery to gradually bring back in the cholesterol and all the other inflammatory disease that is in the plaque. In other words, it sort of sucks back in the cholesterol, not into the blood where it could do some damage and does damage, but in back to the artery wall on the other side of the artery. So it's getting rid of the plaque, not from the inside, but from the outside of the arterial wall. And this process begins with the arginine. It begins with the endothelium. It continues through what's called the muscularis, which is the middle lining of the arteries, the muscle kind of stuff. And so it has a ability to take it out of what happens within the framework of the lining of the arteries, and therefore, by shrinking it and stabilizing the surface of the whole arterial wall, that enables very fast reduction in the risk of heart disease and stroke.
Dr. Joe, we've talked about the tremendous benefits of arginine for the cardiovascular system. Now, are there other benefits that the research and your experience indicates that we can expect to enjoy from supplementing with arginine in our diets?
One of the things that afflicts men as they get around 50, they begin to have difficulty sustaining erections. And sexual dysfunction is something that men just don't want to talk about. And they discuss it infrequently with their wives, and it's just not something that is generally discussed. It's sort of like getting old. But before we knew all the other health benefits for arginine, this has actually been a major thing that people had used to improve sexual function. And all the new products that are coming out, those that have L-citrulline and a variety of other minerals and all, actually are exceeding the expectations that were witnessed before. We had all these special things we were able to do. So it's not only something well recognized, it's something that's better and better with the newer products.
Well, that's absolutely amazing information, Dr. Joe. You know, over the years I'd heard about arginine, but I never had a clue how powerful it was. Now, how much arginine do we need to be taking every day?
You need about 5 grams a day if you want to be able to make everything reverse. This opened up a whole new therapy in my world, where here now we are able to reverse disease, not cure it, but reverse it and hold it in place.
Well, Dr. Joe, I can tell you for me, shopping for nutritional products is really very confusing. If I go to the health food store or go online, there's so many different products and different companies. You got liquids, you got pills, you got powders. I have no idea what to look for in a product. What do you look for in a good arginine product?
That's a great question. What I look for in an arginine product, as you would go to any place to get it, we want most of all to have a liquid. This enables optimum absorption. This does allow it to go in quickly, it allows less toxicity, and we have more assurance that it's getting in. And it should contain L-citrulline, which enables the L-Arginine to work better within the urea cycle, which it works metabolically in, and therefore sustain the activity of the L-Arginine over a longer period of time. I want to emphasize I really like no animal products in there, nothing but natural products, no artificial sweeteners, no artificial colors, just all natural and all good.
Well, Dr. Joe, clearly everyone needs to be taking arginine on a daily basis. But in your experience, are there some other things that we can take on a daily basis that would enhance our cardiovascular health?
Well, it's funny you should ask that. It's very good to have good antioxidants, and OPCs from grape seeds are excellent. We love the omegas from plant sources. The omegas from plant source get away from all the problems of mercury poisoning in the fish, other contaminants that could be in fish, and someone keeps calling me all the time and talking about radioactivity, and I don't think anybody measures this, but these are the kind of possible contaminants. It's very good to have a strong multivitamin. These are the kind of things that are most important.
Dr. Joe, it's been great. Really enjoyed hearing your story about your life, your discovery process, and of course, the incredible results you've had in your practice. I'm excited to say that you've put all of this into a book called The Uncommon Doctor. Can you tell us a little bit about why you wrote this book?
I wanted to give some people a sense of my journey through my personal health and how it contributed to the health of all my patients. The people, I think, would like this book because it portrays my struggle to go outside the limits of medicine, to take charge of my own personal health, know how I was able to do it, and give anybody the chance, and somewhere along the line as I go, the inspiration to know that you can take care of your own health. You can be part of a new revolution, if you will, of the way that you can get information to enable you to live healthier than you ever could before.
Dr. Joe, it's been great having you on the show today. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with arginine. Arginine, the heart-healthy nutrient that's supported by over 35,000 studies and the Nobel Prize in Medicine. For more information about arginine, please visit argineineinfo.com. Once again, you can log on to argineineinfo.com. That's ARGININE info.com. At argineineinfo.com, you can find lots of information about arginine, including links to research documents and studies, plus a helpful comparison of the leading brands of arginine available today. You can also find informative articles and purchase several books, including The Cardiovascular Cure by Dr. John Cook, as well as Dr. Joe's The Uncommon Doctor. Once again, that website is www.argineineinfo.com. That's ARGININE-info.com. Log on today and arm yourself with the information you need to live a more healthy life. Thank you for being part of our show today. I look forward to sharing more breakthrough discoveries with you in our next show. Until next time, goodbye and good health.